It was close to 11. I had just shut off the lights in the workshop and was doing what I always did before bed, checking the side gate, looking at the sky, making sure the tarp over the lumber stack was still tied down. That was when I noticed headlights next door, her trunk open, and half her life sitting in the driveway like somebody had decided it belonged outside. She was moving fast, but not in a panicked way. More like she had decided panic was a luxury she did not have time for. One box. Then a duffel. Then a lamp with no shade. Rain running down her hair, jacket stuck to her arms, mouth set hard like if she stopped for even 5 seconds, something in her face might crack. Her landlord was under the porch roof, dry, holding a clipboard like that made him important. He kept talking while she loaded the car. "I already gave notice," he said. "You gave fake notice," she shot back without looking at him. "You put renovation on paper because saying what you were actually doing would get you in trouble." He spread his hands. "You're making this ugly." She laughed once. "Not because anything was funny. You put my things outside." That was enough for me. I crossed the yard, went straight past him, and grabbed the box she was trying to lift. The bottom bowed in the middle. "This one's done," I said. She looked at me like it took her a second to place who I was. We'd done the normal neighbor thing for months. A wave. A short hello. Once she signed for a package when I was out. That was about it. "I've got it," she said. "No," I said. "You don't." I carried it to her trunk. She followed with the lamp. The landlord started in again, something about procedure, something about access, something about contractors coming in first thing in the morning. I ignored him. So did she. Up close, she looked worse than she was acting. Not weak. Just exhausted in a way people try hard not to show. There was a scrape on one knuckle. Her phone was tucked under her chin while she tried to fit a box between 2 bags. Whoever was on the other end was no help, because after 10 seconds she said, "No, I'm not asking for money. I'm asking if you know anybody with a couch," then pulled the phone away and ended the call. I loaded 2 more boxes before she finally said, "You really don't have to do this." "I know." That got the smallest reaction out of her. Not a smile. More like she noticed I wasn't doing neighbor theater. By the time the worst of it was in the car, it was obvious the math was bad. Too many things. Not enough room. Wet boxes. A back seat already full. She stood there with her keys in one hand and looked at the pile still left by the porch steps. "Do you have somewhere tonight?" I asked. She gave me a flat look. "Does it seem like I have somewhere tonight?" The landlord muttered, "Not my problem." I turned and looked at him long enough that he went quiet. Then I said the thing before I had fully thought it through. "You can move in with me." She stared at me. I heard how it sounded the second it was out. Too big. Too sudden. The kind of sentence people usually dress up before they say it. So I ruined it a little, mostly because that was easier than standing there with it bare. "I mean, unless your plan is sleeping folded up in that trunk. Which, structurally, doesn't seem great." That almost got a real smile, but not quite. She pushed wet hair off her face and studied me like she was checking for the hidden angle. "I'm serious," I said. That was the part that changed it. Not the offer. The fact that I didn't take it back. She looked past me toward my house. Small place. 1 story. Workshop light still warm in the back. Kitchen window over the sink. The side door I used more than the front because it opened into the mudroom and made more sense. "I can't decide something like that standing in the rain," she said. "Then don't." She nodded once, sharp and tired. "Fine." That was it. No speech. No gratitude scene. She got in her car and left with what she could fit. The rest stayed under a tarp I dragged over it after the landlord went inside. I barely slept. Around 6:30 I made coffee, stood in my kitchen, and looked at the guest room like it had personally offended me. It was not really a guest room. More like a spare room where useful things went to wait. Folded table. 2 stacked chairs. Extra shop clamps. A shelf unit I had built but never painted. At 8:12, there was a knock at the door. She stood there in dry clothes this time, hair tied back, travel mug in one hand, the same hard expression on her face like she had spent the whole night arguing with herself and had not enjoyed any of it. "Did you mean it?" she asked. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes." She looked down, then back at me. "All right." By noon her boxes were in my house. By 2, the spare room had a cleared floor, a made bed, and her suitcase against the wall. By evening there was a coffee mug of hers beside my sink and a pair of shoes by my door. That was when it stopped feeling like one sentence said in bad weather and started feeling like my life had actually moved. When I went to lock up the workshop that night, I caught myself looking at the house differently. Not because it was ruined. Because it was no longer arranged only for me. The first 3 days felt like having a chair in the kitchen that had always belonged there and still somehow being aware of it every time I walked past. She didn't act like a guest, exactly. But she didn't act settled either. Her boxes stayed mostly closed. Her clothes were folded too neatly on top of the dresser, like she was ready to pack them again if the ground shifted. She kept apologizing for taking up space without actually saying the words. You could hear it in the way she moved. Careful with doors. Careful with drawers. Always cleaning a counter after using it even when there was nothing on it. I told her on the second morning, "You don't have to move around like you're breaking into the place." She was standing at the stove in one of my old t-shirts she'd borrowed to sleep in, making eggs like she'd been insulted by the pan and planned to win anyway. "I'm not," she said. "You are." She slid eggs onto a plate and glanced at me. "You alphabetized your screws. They're labeled." That is not a defense. It was the first real smile either of us had managed. We started learning each other in practical ways. She liked coffee stronger than I did and never left a mug half-finished. She talked to herself when she was working through a problem, not full sentences, just clipped little comments like her brain was too fast to stay quiet. She kicked off her shoes by the door and then lined them up neatly a second later, as if disorder offended her too. She just arrived there by a louder route. She learned my habits just as fast. That I locked the back door before sunset without thinking. That I checked the weather twice if I had wood stacked outside. That I hated dishes in the sink overnight. By the end of the week she was handing me the shop keys in the morning before I asked for them, and I was refilling the kettle when I heard her laptop open in the kitchen. None of it was romantic in the polished kind of way people like to talk about. It was smaller than that. More dangerous too. Because once somebody starts fitting into your day without effort, you notice. She noticed the loose hinge on the pantry before I got around to fixing it. She noticed I was losing time in the workshop because I kept writing custom orders on scraps of wood and receipts. 2 nights later she came in with a legal pad and said, "This system is terrible." "It's not a system," I said. "Exactly." She sat at the table, asked me every question twice, and built me a clean order sheet with columns for measurements, deposit, delivery date, finish, and materials. Nothing fancy. Just smart. Clear. Hard to mess up. The next morning I found 3 clipboards hanging by the workshop door. I looked back toward the kitchen. "You did that?" She was eating toast, reading something on her phone. "You're welcome." I should have been irritated. I liked my own ways, even when they were dumb. Instead I spent the entire day using the sheets she made and getting through work faster than usual. So I fixed the wobble in the desk she'd set up in the spare room. Didn't mention it. That became our thing for a while. She improved something. I repaired something. She replaced the dead bulb over the sink with one that actually made sense for the room. I tightened the handle on her suitcase where the stitching had started to tear. She reorganized the junk drawer so I could find batteries without swearing. I put up a shelf in the bathroom because her things were still lined along the counter like they were waiting for permission. The house started changing in corners first. A second towel on the hook. Her shampoo in the shower. A bowl on the table with lemons she kept buying for some reason. Then it got harder to pretend it was temporary. She'd come into the workshop at the end of the day, lean against the door frame, and ask how many hours I had left on a cabinet job. I'd walk into the kitchen and smell garlic, onions, something hot in the pan, and know without asking that she'd decided I was eating an actual meal whether I planned to or not. One night we were going over receipts at the table when her phone lit up. She looked at the screen and her whole face changed. Not fear exactly. Something tighter. More annoyed than surprised. "Is that him?" I asked. She nodded once. She put it on speaker long enough for me to hear his voice. Smooth now. Fake calm. Saying there had been misunderstandings. Saying he might be willing to work something out if she stopped making noise about the eviction. She ended the call before he finished. Then she opened her laptop. That was the first night I saw what she was really like when she stopped trying to be polite about trouble. She built a timeline in under an hour. Dates. Messages. Photos. Copies of notices. She had screenshots I didn't know she'd saved, records of payments, names of contractors he claimed existed but apparently didn't. Her anger made her sharper, not Messier. "He thinks I'm cornered," she said. "Are you?" She looked at me across the table. "Not anymore." It turned out he wasn't done causing problems. 2 days later I got a notice about a complaint against my workshop. Noise. Zoning. Unauthorized business activity. All worded just formally enough to be annoying. I stood there reading it with sawdust still on my hands. She took the paper from me, read it once, then again slower. "He filed this because of me," she said. "He filed it because he's a coward." She looked up. "He thinks you're easier to scare than I was." I laughed once. He guessed wrong. "Don't do the man with a hammer version of this," she said, already reaching for her laptop. "We're doing it clean." And that was the moment it became something else. Not just me giving her a room. Not just her helping with paperwork. Us at the table. My property records on one side, her notes on the other. Her building the case. Me pulling permits, invoices, tax forms, every boring piece of proof I'd ever kept because keeping records was what you did when you wanted your life to stay standing. By midnight we had a response drafted, organized, and ready to send. She leaned back in her chair, rubbed her eyes, and looked at the stack between us. "He's going to hate this," she said. I looked at her, at my kitchen, at the mess of documents and coffee mugs and the yellow light over the table. For the first time since she moved in, the house didn't feel crowded. It felt aligned. "Good," I said. After that first complaint, the house changed again. Not on the surface. The coffee still went on at the same time. I still opened the workshop before 8. She still worked at the table some mornings with one leg folded under her and her hair clipped back any time she had to concentrate. But underneath all that, there was a new current running through the place. We were no longer just dealing with inconvenience. We were holding a line. The landlord filed 2 more complaints over the next week. One about parking. One about commercial activity on residential property, which would have been funny if he had not been trying so hard to make it expensive. I had permits. I had tax records. I had delivery receipts going back years. None of that stopped the irritation of seeing my name in another notice because some petty man had decided he needed to punish the woman who stopped being easy to push around. My first instinct was simple. Walk next door to one of his properties, find him, and end the conversation in person. She knew that before I said it. "Don't," she told me from across the kitchen. I didn't say anything. You went quiet in the shoulders. I looked at her. That's not a real sentence. It is now. Then she slid a folder across the table toward me. Tabs. Dates. Copies. She had built the whole thing out while I was in the shop. What's this? Our answer, she said. And the one after that, if he keeps going. I opened it. She had cross-referenced the complaint dates with his messages to her. Pulled county records. Marked where his claims didn't match public filings. There was even a page clipped on top with 3 short notes in her handwriting: do not call him, do not meet him alone, do not give him improv. I laughed before I could stop myself. Improv? Yes, she said. You're good in a fight. I need you good on paper. That was the thing about her. She never tried to make me smaller. She just knew exactly where I was most useful and where I'd burn energy for nothing. So I gave her what she needed. I put cameras on the side gate and above the workshop door. I fixed the fence latch he'd started accidentally leaving open when he came too close to the property line. I measured everything from my setback to the edge of the driveway and wrote it down twice. I kept copies in the house and copies in the shop. If he wanted a clean fight, I could be clean. One afternoon I came in from the workshop and found her in the spare room, kneeling by the bed, res-tacking papers from a storage box. Not work papers this time. Old personal stuff. Lease copies. Utility bills. A torn folder. She didn't hear me at first. There was a look on her face I had not seen before. Not the hard one. Not the efficient one. Just tired. Deep tired. The kind that shows up after the task is done and the body finally notices what it has been carrying. I leaned on the door frame. You okay? She kept her eyes on the box. Yeah. It was a bad lie. Thin and automatic. I stepped in, took the folder out of her hands, and set it on the dresser. Try that again. She sat back on her heels and let out a breath through her nose. I hate that he made me feel temporary. That word, temporary. It's a heavy thing to carry. Have you ever felt like you were just a guest in your own life? Let's talk about it in the comments. The room went quiet. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I knew exactly what I wanted to say and it felt bigger than the space between us. Instead I said, "You're not temporary here." She looked up at me then. Really looked. Like she was checking whether I understood the weight of what I'd just said. I did. That night she worked later than usual. I was locking up when I saw light under the workshop office door. She was inside with my file cabinet open and my permit binder on the desk. "You're still at it?" I asked. He attached a new statement, she said without looking up. It contradicts the first one. I came around behind her. She was right. Different wording, different timeline, same bad idea. She had already marked the parts that didn't line up. He's sloppy, I said. He's arrogant, she answered. That's better for us. There was something about standing there, close enough to smell her shampoo and sawdust on my own shirt, looking down at a mess we were dismantling together, that hit harder than it should have. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because this had become normal. Her in my space. My problem becoming hers without hesitation. Her hands flat on my desk like she belonged there. A few days later the county inspector came out over the zoning complaint. I was ready for a fight. Instead he walked the workshop, checked the permits, asked 3 practical questions, and was done in under 20 minutes. He looked almost bored by the whole thing. Before he left, she stepped forward and handed him a neat packet with copies of prior complaints, public records, and dates. Nothing emotional. Just facts. In case additional filings come in from the same source, she said. He took it, glanced at the top page, and gave her a look that was half respect, half pity for the idiot on the other side of it. By evening we got the first good news. Complaint dismissed. No violation. I found her in the kitchen with both hands braced on the counter, reading the message again like she didn't fully trust it yet. "It's done," I said. "It's one thing done," she corrected, but her voice had changed. I stepped closer. "Still counts." She turned toward me too fast, relief and anger and exhaustion all still mixed together. "Do you understand what he was trying to do to you because of me?" "Yes." "And you're still standing here acting calm." "I am calm." "No, you're not." She was right. I wasn't. Because the truth had gotten too obvious to ignore by then. I was not helping her out for a week. I was not waiting for this to pass so life could go back to normal. Normal had already changed. She was in the house, in the shop records, in the shape of my evenings, in the silence after long days. And when he came after what was mine, she defended it like it was hers too. I put one hand on the counter beside her. "You want to know what I understand?" Her eyes stayed on mine. "I understand that the minute he came after this place, it stopped being only my problem." I paused. "And the minute he put your things in the rain, you stopped being just the woman next door." Something in her face gave way then. Not weakness. Just the end of holding the same wall up for too long. She stepped in first. The kiss wasn't polished or planned. It felt exactly like the last 2 weeks had felt. Earned. A little overdue. More relief in it than performance. Her hand caught in the front of my shirt. Mine found her waist. We stayed there in the middle of my kitchen like the room itself had gone still around us. When she pulled back, she didn't move far. "This makes things more complicated," she said quietly. I looked at her. They were already complicated. That time she did smile. And neither of us pretended anymore that she was just passing through. Once the first complaint got thrown out, the landlord made one last push like the kind of man who couldn't accept that the door had already closed on him. He sent her 2 messages in 3 days. One pretending to be reasonable, offering access to her old unit so she could collect anything left behind, even though we both knew there was nothing left there worth going back for. The second was nastier. Less polished. More like the version of him that had shown up in the rain. He hinted that if she dropped everything, he might be able to help her get into another place he managed. She read it once at the kitchen table, then turned her phone face down. "He really thinks I still don't understand him," she said. I was sanding a cabinet door in the workshop when she came in with that look on her face, the one that meant her mind was already 10 steps ahead. "What?" I asked. He overreached. She held out a printed copy of county records and a page of ownership history. She had circles and notes all over it in blue ink. The property he'd been using to pressure her was not clean. Not on paper. The renovation claim had holes in it. One filing date was wrong. Another document had never been completed at all. And the man threatening my workshop with zoning language had apparently been sloppy enough with his own records that he'd handed us exactly what we needed. By the end of that afternoon she had 3 emails drafted. One to the housing office. One to the property owner behind the management shell. One to the city contact who had already dismissed the complaint against me and now had a fuller picture of the pattern. I read through them at the workbench. No drama. No extra heat. Just dates, contradictions, copies, and a clean summary of what he had done and why it mattered. "You enjoy this a little," I said. She leaned against the bench and folded her arms. "I enjoy competence." I looked at her. That sounded dangerous. "It is." I sent my part too. Permit copies. Inspection result. A short statement about the harassment tied to her eviction. Then we waited. Waiting turned out to be worse than fighting. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because normal life kept going while both of us knew something was hanging over it. I still had orders to finish. She still had work calls, deadlines, a whole outside life that had somehow been running beside this mess the entire time. We ate dinner, washed dishes, locked doors, went to bed, and every quiet stretch in the house carried the same question underneath it. Then the answer came in pieces. The housing office contacted her first. Formal tone. Request for follow-up. Then the property owner's office replied, which was even better. Not friendly. Just alert. Interested in liability. The kind of interest people develop when they realize somebody lower down has been reckless in writing. 2 days later the last municipal complaint against my workshop was closed out for good. No violation. No further action. I read the email twice, then handed the phone to her. That's it? I asked. For your place, yes. She exhaled slowly. For him, not so much. He was done after that. Not because he had changed. Because he no longer had room. The records were against him. The complaint trail was against him. The bluff had run out. He stopped calling. Stopped sending messages. Stopped trying to lean on anything he thought might shake us loose. A week later, she got the offer. A corrected housing arrangement through a different management office. Clean paperwork. Better building. Solo lease. No overlap with him. No obvious trap in it. The kind of thing that, a month earlier, would have looked like the clear finish line. She printed the paperwork and left it on the kitchen table. Didn't say anything about it for most of the evening. I saw it when I came in from locking up. Her name at the top. Terms underneath. Move-in date in 10 days. I stood there longer than I should have. She was by the sink drying a plate. You can say something. I set my keys down. Looks solid. It is. That was all. Just those 2 words. But the room felt wrong after them. Too careful. Too empty. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from the papers. So that's what you're doing. She kept folding the dish towel. Once. Then again. I thought I was supposed to. That hit harder than I expected. Supposed to by who? She looked at me then. Direct, steady, nowhere to hide. By the version of this where I get my life back and stop imposing on yours. I stared at her. You think that's what this has been? I think, she said slowly, that if I stay, I want it to be because we both chose it cleanly. Not because it started on an emergency night and neither of us knew how to interrupt it. The pressure in my chest eased a little at that. Not much. Enough. I leaned back in the chair. Then don't take that place because you think it proves something. She came over and stood at the other side of the table, one hand resting near the lease. I don't want to go backward, she said. That's the truth. Neither of us moved. She looked around the kitchen then, at the shelf I'd put up, at the extra mug by the coffee maker, at the runner by the back door she had bought because she said my floor was too easy to ruin in wet weather. This stopped feeling temporary before I admitted it, she said. I kept waiting to need my own place again the old way. And I don't. I want a place here. With you. But not as somebody you took in. I stood up. She went on before I could answer, like she needed to say it straight through or she'd lose the line of it. I want bills with my name on them. A say in things. Space that's ours because we decided that, not because you were kind in a storm. I don't talk big when something matters. Never have. So I told her the truth the only way I know how. I don't want you somewhere else, I said. I want you here. At the table. In the mornings. Complaining about my systems and fixing half of them. That made her laugh once, quiet and unsteady. I took the lease for the other apartment, folded it in half, and set it aside. Then I pulled open the drawer where I kept the house paperwork and took out the blank room rental form I'd picked up days earlier and never mentioned. Not because I doubted her. Because I knew if we did this, she would need it done properly. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw it. You already had that? I like being prepared. That is the least romantic thing anybody has ever said to me. It's working, though. This time she smiled for real. We sat down together and filled it out side by side. Rent share. Utilities. Term. Nothing dramatic. Just two adults making the shape of a life official because that shape already existed everywhere that counted. Later, when we were done, she took her mug to the sink without asking where it belonged. Because by then she knew. So did I. The next morning I walked into the kitchen and stopped for a second. Her boxes were gone from the corners. Not removed. Unpacked. Her things were where they were supposed to be. Shoes by the door. Coat on the right hook. Fruit in the bowl on the table. Her handwriting on the notepad by the coffee maker, out for 10, don't start the trim without me. For the first time since she came over in the rain, the house felt settled. Not like shelter. Like home.